Out of all the Universal monster movies, my dad's absolute favorite was The Wolfman. Because of my father, I got into horror at a very young age, and I always have felt a connection to horror because of that. Now that Dead by Daylight is my favorite game, and my father is no longer with us, I decided to create a concept for his favorite monster movie to make it into Dead by Daylight. Everything you guys will see today is 100% original. I wrote the story, I created the power, the perks, and the add-ons, and I am very excited after months and months of conceptualizing and then weeks of writing to finally present to you guys the finished version. I hope you enjoy. Henry Worsley Scott was a simple man living in 1890s London. He worked as a chimney sweep with his grandfather, living with the old man after his parents tragically passed away in a horrific car accident. It wasn't bad for Henry. He'd do an honest day's work, make a pound or two, and go home to read his favorite book by the fireplace. He'd sleep every night listening to his grandfather's gentle snores, only to do it all again the next day. Henry never wanted a wife or kids, just his job, his books, and his grandfather. But the old man could not last forever, and one summer's morning in mid-1894, Henry would awaken to find his grandfather had not. Shaking the old corpse and screaming until his voice was hoarse and his throat scratched from the stress, the coroner came and pronounced Henry's grandfather dead. The months that followed saw Henry fall deeper and deeper into duress. The chimney business was slow. Many people did not trust Henry to do it on his own, and what little money he had, he spent on booze and whores to try and fill the void left by his grandfather's passing. Eventually, the young bookworm in Henry vanished, and he became more angry and sullen. One night, after a particularly forgetful lay, Henry grabbed his grandfather's dagger on the bedside table and gutted the poor woman next to him. He didn't know what caused him to do it, what made him think it was a good idea, but what he did know is for the first time in months, Henry felt alive. Over the coming years, Henry would get away with more and more murders. A Study in Scarlet and other Sherlock Holmes had been his favorite tales, and now he had become the very kind of murderer Dr. Holmes would chase. As the police searched high and low for him, and the bodies grew, Henry became more confident, and eventually his sins would catch up with him. In 1899, Henry was coming home from the pub drunk. His murders had allowed him to rob the women when he was done, and he no longer needed the work. When from the alleyway a large beast leapt, surprising Henry. It all happened so fast. The roar, the hard cobblestone road as his back hit it, the sound of his flesh tearing, the smell of his own waste as he urinated himself. Laying there with blood pouring from his throat, Henry gasped as he looked upon the full moon, watching, wondering if this was truly the end. The feeling of a cold metal cot was under his back. He slowly blinked open his eyes and looked around the medical ward. When he went to lift his hand to touch his head, he was surprised as they were cuffed. Well, the murderer finally awake," said a gruffy Cockney voice. It was the police warden. Turns out, as he would explain to Henry, when they found him bleeding in the street, they had also found several pieces of jewelry that belonged to the last victim, and from there they had went back to his home, while the doctor healed his wounds, and found all the newspaper clippings of the murders, clearly written entries in his diary of how he had done it, and how he had selected his victims and why. The doctors would have had healed him, but he would face the justice by hanging for his crimes, for all of London to see. That night, as Henry lay awake in bed, crying for the man he had become and the man he had lost, Henry heard what sounded to be faint whispers. Before he knew it, men in black cloaks flooded the cell, cutting his chains and freeing him. He had no idea what they were doing, who they were, what their motivations were. But as they surrounded him, ushering him from the cell and through the station, he lay witness to the slaughter in front of him. Police officers everywhere lay with their throats slashed and their bellies open. The smell of blood excited him, and he was being rescued. He'd be sure to thank these nice strangers, but before he could, as he saw a black carriage in the road, a hard blow came to the back of his head, and they entered into the street. The sound of wheels along the cobblestone awoke Henry. He smelled the familiar stench of his captors he had spent the last month with, taken from a jail cell of the police to another one of the men in black cloaks. They spoke weird languages to him, told him he would soon realize the blessings he had been given, and tonight was supposed to be that night. As the cuffs dug into his wrists, he looked through the window of the carriage. The sun was setting. They slowed the cart down and tossed Henry into the street. The moon was beginning to rise, and as Henry met the moon's glow with his eyes, he screamed in painful agony. He felt his bones shift, his flesh rip, and he heard the screams of a couple women who stood at the nearby corner, and then it was silent. The morning sun beat upon his face, and the waves from the river he was passed out by licked his feet. His mouth tasted of blood, and he had not wondered why, as his body was covered in it. Surely, whatever happened last night, he had gone insane. Across the lake, a dark fog rolled, and he knew not why, but it called to him, not with a voice or a gesture, but he was sure it wanted him. Henry closed his eyes one last time and embraced it. The Wolfman's power is in two forms. One is his human form, and one is his werewolf form. In his human form, the Wolfman stands at the same height as a survivor. He has a 16-meter terror radius and is a 110% speed killer. While in human form, the Wolfman attacks with a dagger. Desperate grab. Using the active power button, the Wolfman lurches forward at 150% movement speed for a distance of 5 meters. If he contacts a survivor, he enters a grapple with them. Both sides must press the interact key as fast as they can to end the grapple. If the survivor wins, the Wolfman is shoved to the ground and stunned for 3 seconds. If the Wolfman wins, the survivor is injured and suffers from the panic status effect. Check the link in the description for a video I made on Tuesday introducing this effect. The Wolfman is stunned for 5 seconds if he wins. Werewolf form. As the match goes on, a passive blood moon meter will fill, base taking 90 seconds to fill. Successfully grappling, injuring, and hooking survivors will cause this meter to fill more quickly, by 10% for each successful action, similar to the Dredge's Nightfall. When the blood moon meter is filled, the sky has a large red moon, casting the map in a dull red light, and the Wolfman will transform into his wolf form, howling and causing the deafen status effect to all survivors in a 32-meter radius for 15 seconds. While in werewolf form, the Wolfman is now in the tall category. He has a terror radius of 40 meters and he moves at 125% movement speed, but he cannot trigger bloodlust. This form ends when the blood moon meter runs out, base kit duration of 60 seconds. While in werewolf form, the Wolfman's basic attacks become claw attacks, inflicting deep wound on any survivor hit. Similar to the Legion, the claw attack cannot down a survivor with deep wound, but hitting them again will not stun the Wolfman, only granting the survivor an additional speed boost and inflicting them with panic. Feral Leap. When a survivor is deep wounded or injured, use the active power button to leap forward, going over pallets and windows for a distance of 10 meters. If you contact a deep wounded or injured survivor, reset the cooldown of Feral Leap and knock the survivor to the ground. After hitting the survivor with a Feral Leap, all survivors in your terror radius will give off Killer Instinct for 5 seconds. Feral Leap has a base cooldown of 15 seconds. When the blood moon meter is over, the Wolfman will revert to his human form, letting out a scream of pain and being stunned for 2 seconds. All survivors who hear the scream of pain cover their ears and panic for 7 seconds. Interactable item. Old revolver. 6 revolvers will spawn around the map in gun cases. When the Wolfman enters his werewolf form, the aura of these cases is revealed to the survivors. It takes 5 seconds to open a gun case and retrieve the revolver inside. There is 1 bullet per revolver. To aim, the survivor must hold the item use button, and to fire, the survivor presses the interact button. A bullet will fire from the revolver at 10 meters a second, and if it contacts the Wolfman, it will take him out of his wolf form without triggering his revert effect. The revolver then falls apart in the survivor's hand and cannot be used again for the remainder of the trial. Teachable perks of the Wolfman. Unending guilt. Your guilt at the murders you have committed has finally caught up with you. When you kill a survivor in a trial by any means, unending guilt activates. Every 60 seconds, you will scream in agony, causing all survivors in your terror radius to scream in fear and causing them to panic for 5, 10, or 15 seconds. Brutal rampage. Your bloodlust knows no limits. You need to kill. It is not an option, but an obligation. When a survivor is put into the dying state, trigger bloodlust tier 1 for 5 seconds and cause the nearest survivor to you to scream, revealing their location for 2 seconds. That survivor is exposed for 10, 15, or 25 seconds. Well read. The books that once brought you solace taught you valuable lessons, like how to read your opponent's movements. Start a chase with 4 different survivors to activate this perk. When you start a chase with a survivor, they are highlighted in red. You see all pallets and windows within your terror radius, and after 15, 10, and 5 seconds in chase, the survivor being chased vaults windows and pallets 10, 15, or 20% slower until the chase ends. This slow effect may only affect a survivor who is not on their second hook stage. To clarify, because I was rereading this sentence, I just want to make it clear that if the survivor is on death hook, they are not affected by the slowdown. So they are affected by the slowdown for their first hook and their second hook, but not when they're on their death hook. Add-ons. Brown add-ons. Ruined Book. The blood moon meter increases by an additional 5% for each injured or hooked survivor. Torn leggings. Desperate Grab's lunge no longer injures survivors. Gain 100% blood points for winning a struggle. Old Shackles. Werewolf form now moves at 115% movement speed, but the terror radius is reduced to 32 meters. Bloody Cloak. The Feral Leap now breaks pallets instead of leaping over them, stunning the Wolfman for 1.5 seconds. Yellow add-ons. Quill and Paper. Survivors who win a struggle are oblivious after they win. Pile of Soot. Survivors who lose the struggle are blinded for 10 seconds. Police Report. The blood moon meter increases by 15% extra upon a successful struggle. Human Heart. Werewolf form's killer instinct now lasts 10 seconds. Green add-ons. Bloody Coins. Their werewolf form now lasts 90 seconds. Broken Chimney Brush. Survivors who win a struggle will still get injured. Grandpa's Glasses. Survivors' auras are revealed for 5 seconds when they pick up an old revolver. Bloody Bandages. Survivors who win a struggle are hindered by 15% for 5 seconds. Purple add-ons. Stolen Jewelry. Survivors see the aura of the Wolfman every 45 seconds while he is in human form, but any survivor who sees the aura is exposed for 10 seconds. This effect does not activate when the in-game collapse is active. Cultist Dagger. Basic attacks in human form inflict deep wounds, but the speed boost from being hit lasts 2 seconds longer, and the speed is increased to 200%. A Study in Scarlet. Survivors who lose a struggle are mangled and hemorrhaged until healed. Survivors who win a struggle are panicked. The Police Chief's Heart. Your feral leaps go 20 meters and will break any pallets you leap over and block any windows you leap through. Iridescent add-ons. Grandpa's Dagger. Basic attacks in your human form will cause mangled and hemorrhaging, deep wound, and make pools of blood dropped by that survivor glow. A survivor hit while you have this add-on will get a speed boost of 210% for 4 seconds. Volatile Gunpowder. Spawn 2 more gun cases on the map. When a survivor fires an old revolver, the gun will explode instead of falling apart, causing the survivor to scream, revealing their location for 2 seconds. They will be injured if they are healthy, and they will be deep wounded if injured. One thing that I ended up not putting into this concept was a survivor to go with the Wolfman and a map as well, because I wanted to focus more on the Wolfman for this video, and so I didn't want to do an entire survivor to go with him, but if you guys want that, I can definitely do a separate video to go with the Wolfman, and I will try my best to do a map concept, although I wouldn't be able to actively draw anything, so I don't know how well a map concept would go over. But guys, there's nothing really much left to say. I'm so happy to finally have this done. I've been writing and rewriting it for a couple of weeks now. The original draft didn't have the panic feature in it because I hadn't yet wrote Tuesday's video, and then a couple of other drafts were just not what I wanted out of the character. The hardest thing was definitely coming up with the add-ons, but if I can share a goal with you guys, get this to as many people as you can. I'd love to see this concept be brought in front of people like Darva, Spooky Loops, Rapid Main, etc., and more, to get their opinions. And I'd also love to maybe be able to work with Behavior to see if they would accept my concept. This has been my passion project for a very long time. I've had this idea actually since like early February, and so my only regret is that I couldn't afford to get any artwork for it done. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.